Former President Donald Trump returned to Washington, D.C. today for the first time since leaving office to deliver. He came this time to deliver a speech. This comes as the former president has hinted at a 2024 presidential campaign announcement, and on the heels of a primetime hearing by the January 6th Select Congressional Committee last week that accused him of violating his oath of office on January 6th. William Brangham has more.
Judy, the former president's speech featured a familiar dark litany, over 90 minutes of criticisms of President Biden, the Democrats, and the state of the country as he sees it today. Trump also repeated the lie that he won the 2020 election.
I ran the first time and I won. Then I ran a second time and I did much better. We got millions and millions more votes. And you know what? That's going to be a story for a long time. What a disgrace it was. But we may just have to do it again.
Hours before that, and less than a mile away, his former vice president, Mike Pence, spoke at another conference. Pence said the Republican Party needs to be looking forward.
So I don't know that our movement is that divided. I don't know that the president and I differ on issues. But we may differ on focus. I truly do believe that elections are about the future.
To assess these two messages and what actually Republican voters want, we turn to Sarah Longwell. She's a longtime Republican strategist who has spent this summer leading many focus groups with Republicans across the country. She's also the founder of the Republican Accountability Project, which is a political action committee that works to defeat candidates who have repeated Trump's election lies. Sarah Longwell, very good to have you on the NewsHour. We just heard a little bit from President Trump, and he, in his speech today, ranged across a whole swath of issues. From your polling and your focus groups, what are the top issues for Republican voters today?
Well, there's no doubt it's these kitchen table issues that you guys were talking about earlier in the program. It's gas prices, it's inflation. To some degree, it's also immigration. But those are the things. And honestly, it's not just Republican voters. I mean, the economy is the dominant issue that I hear from voters across the political spectrum. But one of the things that voters are less interested in is a lot of the sort of relitigation of 2020 and Donald Trump's grievance, even with Republican voters who tend to agree with him or did suspect that there was something, fishy about the 2020 election. They do want to be looking forward. And I think Donald Trump runs the risk of that message getting a little bit old. I've done 9 focus groups since the January 6th hearings. And one of the things that's really changed from prior to the hearings is that GOP voters, Trump voters, are starting to worry that he is not as electable as potentially some other candidates might be. I think it's not that the January 6th hearings have broken through so much as they're seeping in, and there's starting to be concerns among these voters that Trump might not be able to win. And these Republican voters are very interested in winning. They think that, there's a lot wrong with the economy and with Joe Biden. And so they do want to be looking forward, as Mike Pence said. However, unfortunately for Mike Pence, they are not looking forward toward candidates like him. As far as these voters are concerned, Mike Pence is the establishment. They use very negative terminology to talk about him. They call him a rhino. They call him a traitor. They are much more interested in candidates that are in Trump's mold, from that sort of, they describe it as the America First wing of the party. And so somebody like a Ron DeSantis, who they see as kind of a Trump fighter, but without the baggage, tends to be more where they're headed.
I want to circle back to the January 6th hearings, because those of us here in Washington have certainly been paying a lot of attention, and they have been getting some pretty decent ratings amongst viewers. But the sense we've always gotten is that the conservative media has in some ways downplayed them, has denigrated the hearings as nothing to see here. You were describing how the gist of those hearings has been creeping out or leaking out. What is the sense you're hearing from Republican voters about that? What do they think about January 6th and Trump's role on that day?
They tend to not blame Donald Trump, and they very badly want to move on from the conversation around January 6th. I mean, I think they believe that it reflects poorly on them and on the Republican Party. They would much rather be talking about all the things that they don't like about Democrats. But what's interesting about the hearings, look, they don't like the hearings. They describe them as a dog and pony show. They describe them as a witch hunt. But at the same time, because the hearings have been so effective, they have put Republicans on some defense. And while these sort of the right-wing media ecosystem, they don't carry the hearings and they excoriate the hearings, they've also been forced to kind of engage in the hearings. The right-wing media ecosystem is where these Republicans are going to kind of defend themselves by what the committee is putting forward. And as a result, all of these Republican voters are very aware of the hearings, which isn't always the case. And so they're more engaged with them actually than you might be. So even when they say they don't like them, this is still, I think, causing them to worry about Trump's electability prospects. Because, when we were doing the focus groups prior to January 6th, you would usually get about half the group or more who said that they wanted to see Donald Trump run again in 2024. And in those 9 groups we've done subsequently since the hearings began, there were 4 groups where 0 people wanted him to run again. We did an analysis and it was only 15% of the respondents wanted to see Trump run again in 2024. And that's actually, that's a big turnaround. We were quite surprised. Look, I've been sort of skeptical of the narrative that Donald Trump's grip on the GOP is slipping, because in the focus groups, group after group, they still wanted to see him run in 24. But I've actually seen that start to wane in the wake of these hearings.
I mean, it's so interesting to hear you say that they would hope that if they were the kingmakers themselves, that Trump would not run. We still don't know whether the former president is going to run. Let's just say, though, that he does announce next week or 2 weeks from now that he is running. What is your sense from talking to those voters? Do they then say, okay, he is the guy now, we have to go with him? Or will they, let's say there's a contested primary, turn to a Ron DeSantis or someone like that?
Yeah, I can't be certain of the answer of that. I do think that my guess is that Donald Trump has people also doing focus groups and doing polling, and that they're seeing the same softening in his support that I am. And I think besides his legal troubles, my guess is that part of the reason he's so eager to jump in early is to try to, freeze out other candidates, to try to, reignite people's interest in him. Look, we haven't seen Ron DeSantis on the national stage. We haven't seen, people like Mike Pence or others who might look like they're getting in, what it's going to be like if they're going head to head with Donald Trump. And we all saw what happened in 2016 when there was, a crowded field of candidates. Donald Trump didn't need a majority. He just needed a plurality. And we know that even though his support may be softening, that he does have a very hardcore base of supporters that are going to go with him and maybe only him. And so, if you've got other candidates sort of splitting the vote, and Donald Trump over there with his plurality of hardcore, MAGA voters, that still gives him a leg up in potentially winning the nomination.
All right, that's Republican strategist Sarah Longwell. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.